My name's Chris Meckley from ACI Aquaculture. Talking to the guys here at BRS, they asked me if I wanted to come up, and they wanted me to kind of talk about. I don't have a slide presentation. I'm just talking about my company and kind of the way everything started and where we are today, and all the things and problems that we've gone through, and how we've overcome a lot of issues being a coral farmer. So let's get it going. The ACI Aquaculture was kind of like a pipe dream of mine. When I was a kid, my dad used to tell me that I always said I wanted to be a fish farmer because I had freshwater tropical fish at my house, and he would never let me have a saltwater aquarium because he said it was too hard and it wasn't worth it. He didn't want to see me spend my money on fish that wouldn't live. And as I got older, I started working at a tropical fish store that was all freshwater, and he moved, and then I started working when he closed his doors, I went into a shop called Tony's Tropical Fish over in York, Pennsylvania. And he had freshwater and saltwater, and I really got into the saltwater side of it. And it fascinated me so much that I started my first saltwater aquarium only after my current wife, she just asked me out on a date, and because she was setting up a saltwater aquarium. And that started the real drive for me to really just get into it, learn the Latin names, because I always learned the Latin names of all the freshwater fish. That all since has, disappeared, since that's all been reclassified. Kind of like they're doing with the saltwater corals, and stuff is being reclassified now. So I moved to Florida with my wife, and I started working at 5D Tropical, and loved that, but I wasn't going anywhere. So we had our first daughter, and she got a bad infection and had to use Cipro on her, and I had to sign a waiver. So that's why if you ever hear me say I don't like Cipro, it's because of that. It's a very nasty antibiotic, and if you have to sign it saying your daughter's going to end up, could die from this stuff, I was like, I don't know why anybody would use it in their aquarium. But anyways, so I didn't know what I was going to do after she got out of the hospital, because I ended up losing my other job because they told me I had to be at work, and I said, no, I'm going to be at the hospital with my daughter. She's got a really bad infection, and she could die from this. I'm not going to work. So I got out. She was all great, and I got this harebrained idea talking to my wife one day that I was going to start a coral farm. And she looked at me, and she's like, okay, what's your plan? And I'm like, I'm going to borrow $10,000 for the 0% finance check from Discover Card. So I did. And I bought all the equipment, put it in my garage. It was like 350 gallons. And it just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger from there. I bought my first batch of corals from Walt Smith. I knew Walt Smith for about 6 years. And there was a gentleman over in California. His name was Richard Corelli. And Walt told me to talk to him. And then Walt would send me anything I wanted. So I was an Acropora freak when I started the company. I loved sticks. And I sold Acroporas wholesale to retail stores at a super good value, and that's what took off the company. I got 2 boxes of corals, made 1,500 frags. In a few months, I was down to just a few hundred, bought 2 more boxes from Walt, and I kept doing that over and over and over again. And it started getting a little stagnant with getting people to buy Acropora only frags. They were like, well, when are you going to have some of this? When are you going to have LPS corals? And there was really nobody in the industry selling fragments wholesale. So I started buying from other wholesalers, bigger colonies, and then breaking them down and healing them and making them look nice without being all freshly cut up. And that was kind of been our signature, is we don't sell freshly cut corals. We sell corals that are all cut and healed and looking like another coral, not just some chopped up, I call them chop shop corals. It's not really the best name for it, but when you break it down, if somebody's just chopping it up and selling it, it's all about the money. I was all about learning about the animals. So that's kind of really where it just all went. And ACI Aquaculture is the pipe dream, because it was, if you think you can keep an aquaculture facility and do it at a wholesale level, you need all kinds of money, and that's something I didn't have. And that $10,000 loan that I got was paid off in the first year, and I just kept reinvesting back into the company. And it just showed the drive and the passion I had for it, because I did not want to borrow money, and I wanted to be the breadwinner in the family, and my wife was at the time. And I grew up where it's just, I guess, a traditional family where the man was always the breadwinner. And I got nothing against women being the breadwinner, but my head said I have to keep my wife from working. So we just kept going and going. And then in 2000, I started to work on importing corals, and I kept losing money. You know, people burnt me. They would just, you know, all these photos, everything was coming over good, send them money, never get corals. And I think we lost about $10,000. And my wife got laid off in May of 2009. ACI started in 2007, and it supported itself, and I was making money, able to contribute to the family, and I felt good. And when she got laid off, we looked at each other like, what are we gonna do? ACI can't support us. You know, getting a job in her field was gonna be super difficult. So we just kind of jumped into it together, and I stuck to my guns from there on out and never let a company in Indonesia take my money. I said, I'm getting the product first. Send me the product, I pay my bills, I always do. And I finally found somebody to do that. And they got one shipment to me, and I paid them exactly the day I was supposed to pay them, according to our agreement. And that's where it all began. And the import side of ACI Aquaculture was only to fund the aquaculture side of it, because we don't have the ability to get grants and all this stuff that we can get, you know, from the state, even though we're certified through the state of Florida. So it's extremely expensive to aquaculture corals, and the only way we could do it was by selling wild imports. But then it became a passion of, actually more of an addiction of, wow, I didn't realize there was so much out there and so much available to the aquarium trade that is unique and different. There's a lot of the same. So we then started taking from our import shipments the unique, the stuff that you don't see very often. You get one-off, so you get 5 pieces out of 1,000 pieces of coral you got in that you never saw before. Those 5 pieces got put aside and put on the farm. And everybody that was walking into the facility would be like, I want that. No. It's for the farm. It's for the future. I want that. People would get mad, so then people stopped supporting me because I wouldn't sell them the 5 best pieces of coral that were in the shipment. So we decided to hide them in our sumps. So if you've ever been to my facility or seen pictures of my facility, the addiction is so real. I love corals so much that there's not a square inch of space that holds water that doesn't have corals growing in it. And my sumps have so much coral in it, and it's all stuff that is unique that I'm just trying to get an idea of what is it going to do. I'm going to keep this coral for 3 years, 5 years. Is it going to hold those colors? Is it going to shift and turn into something that I don't want, that I can put up for sale? And sometimes wild corals do not hold those colors in captivity. I'm sure any hobbyist that's in here has bought a coral that was absolutely stunning, and it completely shifts to a different color. And you're like, wow, it's not nearly as beautiful as what it was when I bought it. Well, our goal is to make sure that when we offer up a coral, that it's been proven to hold that color, and we can tell you every bit of data that we have on it, on its growth, what you need to feed it, the light that it needs. Can you get more color out of it with lower light, or is it with higher light? Is the nutrients, you know, what are the nutrient levels? And one of the things we've learned over the last 15, 17 years, that there's so many variables, and everybody's system is so completely different that most people can keep the corals and keep the colors and keep them growing in their system because it works in their system. Ours works the way we do it. People argue with me all the time about nutrients in an aquarium. Well, after all the years of doing this, I used to blast my corals with as much light as I could give them, you know, for years and years and years. And then when nutrient levels would rise, because I never really followed them, you know, for the first probably 5 years. But once I realized that, okay, I'm keeping all of these corals that are mixed. It's a mixed system. It's LPS, it's SPS, it's soft corals. you know, they all come from different parts of the reef. And as I've learned and as I've grown from talking to the collectors that collect the corals in, you know, in Australia, Indonesia, going to visit and seeing all the different reefs that are available. I mean, you can go to an SPS reef that's crystal clear, you know, for 7, 8 months out of the year, and then that same reef could be murky and just full of silt other times of the year because of the, you know, the weather and because of summer versus winter. So I'm still learning. I don't like the word expert, and I say I'm always learning when somebody likes to say the word expert around me, because if I become an expert, I say I don't need it anymore. I know enough. I'm done, and that's just impossible if you're in this industry. We have gone from maintaining systems that are full SPS systems with super low nutrients and super high light, and then slowly incorporated LPS corals into them as well. And then we have to figure out, okay, we have to balance the nutrients. We need a higher nutrient level if we're running lower light to offset for the less light for the highlight corals. And if you get it figured out, you can run an SPS tank on, you know, 150 to 180 par, but your nutrient level should be on the higher side, and you'll still get amazing colors and growth out of your SPS corals. But on the LPS side, if you run a low nutrient and a high light, they end up just bleaching instead of turning brown like would happen with an SPS coral. So the evolution of our company has just been learning all the different regions where the corals come from and how can we incorporate one system to maintain them with the same water parameters. And it's an art, and it doesn't always work, especially when you put a new coral that you got in from the wild that you put through quarantine. Getting that coral to actually hold color and be happy sometimes can take up to 2 years, sometimes up to 5 years. I've got corals that we've been farming for the last 5 years that have never seen another system other than the system they're growing in. But now that they've adapted to captivity, we can then frag them, and I can put them in any of the other systems, and they adapt extremely well. So we started off with, sorry, I kind of digress and go off, and I'm going to come back down to the garage days. You know, I like to call them the garage days. You know, reminds me of the band Metallica. They had an album out called The Garage Days, and it was talking. You know, when you hear them talk about it, it was like, you know, you have to start somewhere. Well, we started in our garage, and we went from like the 350 gallons from the original system and kept investing back, and buying all the fancy equipment was like, you know, I can't afford to do it. So the money that we had, we found used equipment, and we modified the equipment, and that's how we continued to expand in our garage. And we ended up having over 2,500 gallons of water in the garage, and we're importing a coral shipment every single week. And we got to the point where our neighbors started to say, you know, it's kind of ridiculous. You have your customers driving into our neighborhood to buy your corals, and then they're leaving. So I got in trouble with the homeowners association, and got in trouble with the city of Plant City because somebody reported me. And it just so happened that we had already started looking for property and a place to move out so we could expand and actually get a real coral farm going versus the little 4x4 area that was what we had for our coral farm, which really is not a coral farm. When you break it down to what we have now, so we found this building, and we said it was too good to be true, not gonna be able to work, the rent was perfect, but the landlord kept saying, yeah, I'm gonna cover your rent or your electricity, don't worry about it. I'm like, no, you have no clue what you're getting into if you're gonna cover my electricity bill. And we have a 600 amp service coming into there. And I learned a lot about electricity then too. You know, a 600 amp, and if you don't know about electricity, that's 600 amps on this leg and 600 amps on this leg. So when we started figuring out how much power we were drawing, and then the landlord coming to us, man, your electric bill is almost as much as your rent is every month. And I'm like, I wrote it out in the contract. You guys are covering the rent. I explained it to you that it's going to be a problem down the road. Well, when it came up to renewing the contract, he's like, we can't do this anymore. I'm like, okay, so what do you want to do? I'm like, put the electricity in my name. So we did. And then I just went crazy. I started just expanding, and we had went from just about, was it 5,000 gallons of coral systems and a 4,000 gallon fish system. And it just turned into this, okay, where can I put more coral systems? We ended up losing every bit of space for storage, for boxes, for anything we needed for shipping. And we built an extension off the back of the building. And now COVID hit. So when COVID hit, we couldn't get fish. And I loved doing the fish because it brought a lot of customers into us, and from starting in the garage, just doing strictly corals and having this dream of having a coral farm, we had 2 nice sized farm systems. They were 2,500 gallons. And, God rest his soul, Jake Adams, when he'd make his way to Florida, I'd get a phone call, hey, I'm staying at your house this weekend. I missed those days because he never asked. He just said, hey, I'm staying at your house this weekend. I never had a problem with it, because Jake and I would literally just go to the farms and we'd geek out over the corals for hours upon hours upon hours. And he would sit there and go, how do you do this? How do you keep your sumps completely filled with corals? And it's everything and anything. There's barely any light over that part of it. Then you got metal halide banks going down the center of your 12-foot by 6-foot tank, and T5s on the outside. All your acros are down the middle, but you got all these LPS corals. And he's like, and moreover, he's got the par meter out measuring everything. He's like, this doesn't make any sense. He's like, and your nutrients are what? And I'm like, it's an art, Jake. And he's like, you're the only person I've ever seen keep SPS, LPS, and softies looking to the best they can possibly look in a coral system. And he's like, teach me. To hear Jake say that, because Jake's a very opinionated guy, he was very, very strong in his beliefs. And, we grew to, we hated each other in the beginning, and we grew to love each other, all the way to the end. And I tried helping him with some things, and he could never get it figured out. And he's like, I still don't know how you do it. He's like, but, just keep doing what you're doing. But that's kind of the art of what we're doing. I'm a problem solver. I don't like to ask for help for anything. And I like to just figure things out. And we had I figured out basically where corals are happy and where corals are not happy. You can't just take a coral from this system and put it into any old part of the system. You have to put them in similar areas where, like, say, Favia, Favites, it's no longer Favia, it's Dipsastria. Did you all know that? There's all the reclassifications are getting to be incredibly hard to keep up with, especially not having Jake around to do it. But that's part of what we like to evolve into, is making sure that we're educating all of our customers, by putting a Latin name on all of the corals that we sell. In the farmed corals that we sell, if it's wild, I use the Latin name. To me, there's no common name on any wild imported piece because it's wild, and that's I think one of the biggest industry problems is you can get a wild torch coral. It looks like what the original dragon soul was, and cut the polyp off of it, and they call it a dragon soul. Well, it came from the wild. Its DNA is probably completely different than the original strain. But nobody's regulating that right now, which we've been working on. That's also a big part of stress levels for me, because dealing with getting anything reclassified or getting standards put into an industry. I finally met somebody that worked with the reptile side, and they worked on it for years to get the standards in the industry so that names were everybody abided by them. It will happen in the coral side of it someday if my wife and I have anything to say about it, because it's something we've been working on. But we run an 18,000 gallon coral farm, and it's quite difficult to get any free time to actually, it's time consuming. But from the garage days to the farm to doing and importing tropical fish, I love tropical fish. And we thought that would be a great thing to incorporate into, so people could be like a one-stop shop. So we had inverts, tropical inverts, the saltwater fish, and the corals. And at the farm we're at now, we actually had a good bit of aquaculture. And in this industry, data is everything. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of people taking and keeping track of all the data that is needed to give us the status that we need as an industry to standardize things. So that's why we want to do what my wife has been very adamant about doing with our coral farm from day one. When we take a coral that we want to put on the farm, that gets added into our QuickBooks systems as a freshly wild fragmented coral. And then as we continue to grow that coral, so we put 5 fragments that are on 1-inch plugs. As they grow out big enough that we can fragment each one of those, we started off with 4 in QuickBooks. When we frag them down, we change that number to, and we put a date on it. So we have exact data from the day it went on the farm to then when the day comes that we can release it. And as a wholesaler, you know, this was probably one of the biggest things I wish I wouldn't have done. I wish I would have just done it at retail side, because it's a lot more difficult for us as a wholesaler to farm corals and actually offer them, because when you have a customer base of 800 emails that go out every week, what are you supposed to put on the market? You're supposed to put 10? No, I mean, that gives 1 per store, and it gives you 10 stores to be able to want it. If it's a really popular piece, they're gone. And then you gotta wait 6 months, a year before you can put them back on the market. So we have to have room to take that 4 or 5 corals and put them and grow them to 80 or 100. And if they're really beautiful, I try to get up to 200 pieces available before we can put on the market, because they're gonna be gone in a matter of weeks. But we have to limit people, kind of like ORA did back in the day. And I don't know if they still do that, but that was one of the things I tried to guide my company off of, because they were like the first company to actually truly aquaculture their corals and offer them on a wholesale level. And I remember when the Red Planet came out, and that was in the early 2000s, and they would allow each store to get 2. And I didn't have ACI at the time, and I wanted one so bad, and I'd always be the last person there, and damn it, I missed it again this week, you know, and I had to wait till next week. And I never ended up getting a real Red Planet until actually we got the ACI farm going, and then I had people give it to me. Here, it's growing too much. Take one, use it for your farm. But that's, to farm corals on a wholesale level, a lot of people don't realize the difficulty that we have doing it. You know, if something happens like a hurricane, you know, we got acropores that are growing like weeds, and every hurricane, we try to evolve to get better at being prepared for a hurricane. And ACI's been through 10 of them, and every time we've gotten better and better and better, but we always lose acropores. And this last one, Milton, was like, I'm like, we're prepared, we know what we're doing, we got the backup generator when the power goes out. It was perfect, but then we never would have ever thought about the wind blowing north at 110 miles an hour right over my farm for like 3 hours. It blew in. If you've ever been in Florida, you guys all know what Spanish moss is? Okay, it's a nuisance invasive species that is everywhere. And it doesn't get blown away until you get a storm going by, like a hurricane. Then it just disappears from the trees for, you know, a year or 2, and then of course it comes back. It all blew up under the gables of my farm and landed on the first system, which is my 4,500 gallon, my biggest 4,500 gallon coral farm, and it clogged up every drain. And the pumps were still running because that's how we had the backup generator going. And we lost about, the sump is 1,000 gallons, but because I keep coral in it and I have to worry about overflow, I keep about 550 to 600 gallons in it. We lost almost the entire sump of water, and the pumps were running dry. And then all the corals that were the acros in the main acro tank there, they were all out of the water by about this much. So every single one of them was dead when we finally got everything back up and running. So I lost, well, below where there was water, they all lived, but I ended up losing so much growth that it's gonna set me back for a couple of years with being able to release them. So from the time we get a coral on our farm, we're looking at 2 to 5+ years before that coral is actually sellable. So if I sell fragments of that original mother colony out and somebody else wants to grow it and they're just a retail store, they can slap any name they want on it and they start selling it. Or they put chop shop frags out with a name on, because everybody in the hobby needs a name because they think it's important, and in reality all they're doing is paying more money for the coral. If you have a company like ours, you will pay more money for it because it deserves more money, because we put years and years of effort into making sure that coral is going to have a fighting chance, and what we photograph is true to what it's going to be while you have it in your aquarium. Now, yes, we use metal halides, we use T5s, and we do use some LEDs. Will the color shift under LEDs? Yes, it will. unfortunately, I think they shift for the worst. Because I get a lot more subtle colors out of metal halides and T5s with some LED accents. And it tends to be that if you're not using your LEDs with an all like so-called full spectrum from the LED, which means running your whites and your blues, but only running your whites for like 4 or 5 hours a day is super important, because then that helps to bring out some more of those subtle colors and doesn't just shift them strictly over to that blue light spectrum that is going to cause them to be different, you know. And then shifting them back to the white light, they usually stunt their growth too. So if you have LEDs, which I'm sure everybody does, because it's hard to get metal halides and T5s nowadays, we use them strictly for the fact that we're farming and we need faster growth, and we need that, you know, full spectrum to hit the water column, because I think it's extremely important, because, you know, the sun has been here for 4.5 billion years, and if we're smarter than that, I don't understand where our human beings get off saying that we don't need ultraviolet and UV and infrared light. The corals don't need it, but the ecosystem does. And so much stuff is missing from the ecosystem if you don't have those light spectrums. It causes balance in your microbiome. I've been working with Eli, not as much as I want to because I don't have the time, but Eli at Aquabiomics, as you guys have heard of him? He was, when I talked to him for the first time, he's like, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think the reasons why we have endless cyanobacteria problems and endless dinoflagellate problems in reef aquariums, that, you know, all the old heads like me and, you know, Richard Ross and all these, they've never remembered us having those types of issues until LEDs were the standard in the industry. And the theory is without the UV and the infrared, there's bacterial species missing and families missing in your water column. And without having a true balance of what is actually found in the ocean in our system, which we'll never get, but we can try to imitate or get it there as fast, as much as we can. Without those, there's nothing to combat the overgrowth of the cyanobacteria or the dinoflagellates. And I don't see it. I don't remember the last time I saw dinoflagellates or cyanobacteria. The only time I remember seeing it was when it was in one tank only, and the tank was lit up strictly by coral care LEDs, and I had a tank right next to it lit up with T5s and metal halides, nothing. Same exact water. Some metal halide, no dinoflagellates. So I ended up, and that was when I was running the more blue with the LEDs. So I turned 100% white, 100% blue, and turned on a UV sterilizer. Well, it disappeared. So I turned off the UV sterilizer, came right back. So I put T5s up, never came back. And that's just trial and error. So the whole point of that was, over the years, the evolution of ACI, we've gone through all these different scenarios that, you know, I want to be good to the environment, but I also want to be logical about what we do. And LEDs and hobbyists, as well as the dry rock thing, I got on this bandwagon 4 years ago when I set this 4,500 gallon farm system up, that, you know, I'm going to do the right thing. I'm not going to order, you know, 5,000 pounds of live rock to throw in this system. I'm going to get Julian Sprung's stack rock. I know Julian extremely well. I'm like, Julian, send me a pallet of Stax rock, and I'm going to put this rock wall in this tank. And that tank has been the biggest nightmare that I've ever had to deal with to this day. And I started off with LEDs, no T5s. It was just Reef Brights and Coral Care LEDs and dry rock. And to cycle the system, I don't like using chemicals. Everybody's like, oh, just use ammonium chloride. Okay, well, where's the organics? You know, that's not a natural cycle. Why wouldn't you throw some shrimp in there and let them rot? Or, you know, this is pretty disgusting, but I told my guys, I'm like, let's speed the process up. I'm like, when you have to go to the bathroom, guys, just go in the tank. You know, it's urea, but there's still some ammonia in there that's going to help it all out. And believe it or not, we got the parts per million up to 8 ppm of ammonia. My guys doing that for a week straight. And then I was like, well, that's not all the ammonia that we would really need. So we threw some shrimp in, and then we threw in some ammonium chloride. And that made such a big difference. with getting the tank cycled properly. And then we put corals in. Everything was doing well. All of a sudden, dinos popped up. And I'm like, can't do this anymore. I'm getting rid of the LEDs. I put metal halides back up. Stopped having all the problems. But now there's problems that I can't figure out. And I can take a coral from that farm system that looks extremely happy one day and starts receding, and then move it to a system that was set up with real live rock and metal halides and T5s, and that coral will come back 100% and never have any issues. If I take it and put it back into this system, it does exactly the same thing. So over the time, again, I used all real live rock for the original setups for all of ACI's farm systems. And I started doing what the hobbyists were programmed to do by the companies selling the products, to go to LEDs, to go to dry rock. And I now think that 100% the reason why we have problems in hobbyist aquariums is because we aren't using real live rock to cycle our aquariums like we used to do. And we're using superficial light, which in reality is LEDs are a strobe light. If you take a camera that can really slow down the shutter speed, even at 100%, you can see that LED is flashing if you have it. Metal halides don't do that. T5s supposedly do, but I haven't been able to see that. Using a combination is the best way. And if you don't want metal halides, T5s are by far a better choice. They don't put off as much heat, but they give you a true as full of a spectrum as you can get out of a bulb. And I know Richard just walked in. He's going to argue with me about this one, but from my experience and what we do, I hope that they never ban completely metal halides and T5s, because I don't want to have to learn how to reef all over again, because I didn't have the time to do it when I switched the first time, so I switched back. And I don't like to see people that have these endless issues with their aquariums. And I think it's extremely important to duplicate the lighting that the sun produces on your system as much as possible. And I know you agree with me too on some of those things, but some of those stuff. But the newest thing that came out, which I'm really excited about, we're getting to the end of kind of the evolution. We went from the $10,000 loan, never borrowing more money, and just building the company out and just doing what I love for a living. If you ever get to do something that you don't feel like you work every day, I'm actually probably one of the few people in the world that gets to say that, because I don't feel like I work. I get up and I have no problems going over to the farm and playing with corals and enjoying the beauty of them and talking to customers. And these events like this, I love talking to everybody that I can talk to about, sharing the knowledge that I know and learning new things. But the last farm system that we put in is finally getting real live rock put into it. Since I switched over to the halides and T5s and still use the LED accents, all that dry Stax rock that Julian sent me 4 years ago, I'm gonna just take it out, sit it in the sun, and use it for coral mounts or something. I'll utilize it some way. But I imported 15,000 pounds of Indonesian live rock because, again, the only difference between that system and all of my other systems is they were all set up with real live rock. The pumps are the same. Yes, the water's not the same. The microbiome in the system is completely different, and I think it attributes to the fact it's from the real live rock that I put in there versus the dry rock and trying to do a sterile type system. And I've never actually taken a wild piece of coral and stuck it in there either. It's all been farm coral, so it's stuff that we've grown, that we cut every bit of skeleton off of that coral before it gets mounted onto a frag plug, and then it's sealed up by glue. So we didn't get any internal microbiome from the corals itself from the other systems. So we didn't introduce the microbiome that we're missing. So we did a microbiome test on Grow Out 3 and on Grow Out 1. My jaw dropped. Eli's like, what are you doing different between these two systems? I'm like, real live rock metal halides, dry rock LEDs, and now metal halides. He's like, this is fascinating. So I had somebody else that had a system set up exactly, two different systems set up exactly the same way, and sent those systems to Eli, and they were almost identical with the families that were missing in the system that was set up with the dry rock. So light bulb goes off. Okay, you've been doing this wrong. You did something against your normal thought process, and now you're kicking yourself in the rear end, because I don't like to see my corals die. And I've seen more corals die in that system that's because of what I did, I'm pretty sure of, in the beginnings of it. And I'm hoping now with the real live rock that I have that's in the system cycling, that when I start replacing it, it's going to take time, but I'm hoping within 6 months or so, some of the issues that we were having will disappear. And I'm hoping that when I do the microbiome test again, that the bacteria families that were missing in that system that were present in the other systems become present. If not, then my head's going to go crazy again. I'm not going to know what to do. I'll have to go back to the drawing board and figure out what else to do to get that microbiome back, to where it's supposed to be. But as a coral farmer, and been doing this for 18 years, and a lot of people in here are hobbyists, if there's any advice that I can give you guys, listen to one person on how to reef. Richard's amazing at it. I won't do things his way, he won't do things my way, but his way works, my way works. Everybody's got a different way, but you have to ask them for their aquarium. I want to see your tank. I want to see videos of your tank. I want to see pictures of your tank. Don't let them just talk your ear off about how good they are. Visually see it for yourself. If you like what you see, stick with their advice. If you like what I have to say, you can see my stuff everywhere. Listen to what I have to say. I do the simplest possible method you can do to take care of an aquarium. It doesn't work for everybody because of the different types of coral that are being kept in aquariums, the density of the corals in aquariums, and my method is simple and easy. It just might require more monitoring of certain elements because they might rise, because kalkwasser adds a lot of calcium. There's a lot of ways you can do it. And like I said, just pick somebody that you trust and their aquarium looks good. If I had to do what I'm doing all over again, I could talk to you for another hour and a half or 2 hours, because it is so many things that we learned in the beginning when plumbing the systems together, and things that I would do different now. That's the other thing. When you're plumbing your tank together, there's so much gear out there, and there's nothing wrong with the gear. But in my personal opinion, as hobbyists, if you're setting up a system and you're at a shop and they're selling you equipment, they really are selling you equipment, is it going to work for you? Yes. But you should say, I want a protein skimmer, I want a sump, I want a good light, and I want a return pump and a wave pump and some real live rock. If they do the dry rock, I'm pretty sure that the theory of mine is going to start taking off in the hobby as I start talking about it more, after I prove my point, hopefully in the next 6 months, that we need real live rock. We need wild corals. And it is very sustainable if it's done properly. And the amount of live rock that's been collected from around the world over the last, how long have they been taking live rock? Since the 70s? I don't know. That amount of rock is a minute amount of rock compared to the size of the coral reefs that we're looking at. And when they take the rock, they don't take it from the thriving reefs. They take it from inshore areas. It's not destroying reefs. It is taking it away, but it's like we need wood to build a home, so if we sustainably harvest it, we've got forest forever. If we sustainably harvest corals and rock, we'll have the reefs forever. And I always say this too, they're gonna be around a lot longer than what we will. The Mother Earth is gonna just say one day you're gone, and they're gonna kick us off, and all this stuff that we've done to it's gonna all recuperate, and the planet's gonna be an amazing place all over again at some point. But reefing isn't as hard as it's made out to be nowadays, in my opinion. If you keep it simple, you can really have a thriving aquarium. I mean, my first aquarium, we put, it was a 20-gallon tank with an Aquaclear filter and an undergravel filter and dolomite. And it was African cichlid tank converted over. And I got so much success with that little aquarium. And then I evolved and got into a sump and everything else was normal back 30 years ago. But I'm digressing again. I apologize for that. ACI was a passion thing. And I'm extremely happy that the following that has come about it with what I've been able to educate people on has taken off to where it's known. And I want to help anybody in the reefing community, no matter what. I've always been there to send me a private message on Facebook. If I don't answer you right away, I'll answer you. I answer people's messages from around the world all the time. And it's just advice that I can give. You can take it, or you can use it to make yourself think more about what you're doing. Because like I said earlier, there's more than one way to reef. And if you figure out that my way works best for you, continue to ask. I'll help you all the way through it. But we plan on becoming more of a coral farm here if Indonesia shuts down by supposed to be the end of 2025. I've been talking about it for over 2 years because that's what the laws say in Indonesia. It kind of scares me in a couple of ways because I like getting those one-off pieces to keep my diversity for my coral farm, interesting. Because eventually, when there's no more Indonesian corals coming in, what's going to happen to the farmed corals? We're going to have this stagnant thing where he's got the same thing as this guy, and we're not going to have anything new. But that is part of what I'm learning from Richard. This man's doing coral spawning. We are too, and I'm nowhere near the level of this man. He's been doing it a lot longer than me, and I'm hoping that this year I get spawn out of my original parents that were gravid from the wild on Acanthophilia deshantia. I don't even know if I pronounced the last name right. But that's kind of where the evolution is going with us, is anybody can take a coral and chop it up into pieces and grow it out. That's the easy part. It's how are we going to get diversity in our industry from coral farmers if we don't learn how to farm corals sexually? Because that's the only way you get the genetic diversity that you're looking for. So you can take this Phavites pentagona that is silver and pink and red, and you can take this red one with the bright green coralite eyes, and everybody's got this one, everybody's got this one, so let's spawn these two in this tank. Let's see what these create and see if we can get some new genetic beautiful piece of coral out of it, or it's going to turn into something that nobody wants, and then it's like, okay, we got another year to wait, and that's the process. It's a year from every spawn. It's a year. The next year is when you get another spawn. So it's a long, drawn-out process to do. But my wife was such an Acanthophilia nerd, and she's like, we're going to spawn Acanthophilias, and then Carrie O'Neill. You guys know who Carrie O'Neill is? Not everybody does. I call her the queen of coral spawning. She's an amazing young woman. I learned so much from her. Without her, Amanda and I would have never spawned Acanthophilias at our farm, and we wouldn't be on the verge of doing it again in the next few months when they spawn, which fingers crossed that our adults that we've had now for a year that we got babies from actually do it again. I'm nervous about that. You've done it how many times? You're on what, third generation, Richard? Second. Okay, but is that your babies that spawned? Your babies spawned.
You like his great-grandpa.
But the whole point of getting into the evolution for us is we started off not knowing anything about aquaculture, and we thought we knew something about aquaculture. And how naive was I to keep continuing to go on about aquaculture when it's a hell of a lot harder than what people think it is. It's a lot more time consuming, and it takes up a lot of space. And then when you think you got the fragging part and the asexual aquaculture down, then you think, like I just said, how are we going to get genetic diversity down the road? Then I was like, oh, okay, well, I know Carrie O'Neill's not far. I got introduced to her from Shane Lafreniere and Richard Back from Aficionado. They came up to do videos at my facility, and we never did a video because they brought Carrie along. Well, Carrie and I stood there, and we knew each other, didn't know each other, didn't even know each other, was 45 minutes from each other. And we were laughing about that for probably an hour. And then for like 3.5, 4 hours, we just sat there and talked. And Richard finally said, why don't you just come in and go live on reefs.com, you two just having a conversation about what you're doing. So the last half was like another 2.5 hours of me and Carrie on a live feed on reefs.com talking about coral and talking about ideas, and she was throwing all these things out at me about my coral spawning system that we had just set up. And I was naive to that because not thinking about what I had done. We had like 60 acanthophilias in 150 gallons of water. I mean, that's not smart. I mean, didn't think about it at the time, and I've never told like a group of people why that wasn't smart. We spawned the corals, we settled the corals, we had babies. We still have, I only have 4, Richard. But guess what? They're about the thumbnail size. And then Interfish in Australia, ACI Aquaculture, and Kerry O'Neill, we were the 3 groups or 3 separate systems that were working on spawning the acanthophilias. And the guys in Australia did it first. They did it, it was after the November full moon was when they're spawned. And Kerry and Amanda and I are going, why haven't ours spawned? Why haven't ours spawned? And they had theirs set for basically the same thing. Light schedule and moonlight schedule and temperature schedule was all set for Denpasar, Bali, which was like the Lombok Strait where acanthos are found. And then you have Manado, you have the Cape over in Australia where there's a lot of acanthophilias found. And they had theirs set for the Cape. They had just gotten their corals a month before their spawning event happened. And so I don't know if it was why ours didn't spawn, because it was basically the light schedule was the same, but ours took an entire month later until they spawned. And Kerry O'Neill had her set up on the Manado Sulawesi, and hers spawned on the 8th and 9th day after the December full moon. And my wife is there every night for 2 months, just waiting and waiting and waiting. And, you know, you go in there with a red flashlight on your forehead, looking at the corals, all the flows off, and Amanda's thinking that the corals are spawning when they're pooping. And she's in there with pipetters. Hey, I see some eggs, and we send it to Kerry. She's like, that looks like an egg, but it doesn't look like it's healthy. And she's like, well, it looked like it pooped, but I looked like there was eggs. She's like, it pooped, Amanda. It pooped. So we had so much fun with the whole process of understanding what's going to happen when these things spawn. What do we need to look for? And Amanda was over there for literally 2 months straight. And the one night she got so discouraged, it was the 14th day after the full moon in December. Kerry's had already spawned. Hers still didn't settle, because these little things are the worst things in the world. 2 weeks to settle, which Kerry was pulling her hair out. So her spawned on the 8th and 9th day, and on the 14th day, Amanda was so sick of going over there. She's like, I'm not going over. My daughter says to me, Daddy, we have to go, because mommy was over there for all these months, and nothing was happening. And I'm like, okay, let's go. I'm like, you're driving, because I don't feel like driving. I left my keys for the farm at the house. And now it's like, no, we can't get in the farm. Let's just go home. Nothing's going to happen. She's like, Daddy, get your keys, get your ass back in the car, and we're driving back over there. We got over there. Isaac and my son Isaac and Amanda were watching a movie. And my wife didn't have her damn phone on, and I caught it. I'm blowing it up. I'm like, we got babies. The whole top of the tank was just filled with eggs. And I'm sitting there trying to pipette these things off, because they don't do like acros and the normal corals. Like, all the people were telling me, oh, you'll get egg bundles, and you'll get sperm bundles, and you'll be able to collect the egg bundles and sperm bundles. No. That's not what acanthophilias do. I had to pick the hardest coral on the planet to spawn. They release sperm, and it's a big cloud, and the tank turns milky. And then the next thing you know, they just start like 5, 6, 7 pulses. They're big and fluffy. They'll pulse down. All the eggs will come out, then they'll fluff right back up, and then they'll pulse again. And it's so cool to watch. We have it on video. And then it takes about an hour for fertilization to happen, but there's no bundles to collect. So I'm calling Kerry up. I'm like, Kerry, how the hell did you collect all these? She's like, I told you these things are the worst corals on the planet. It took her hours to get all the eggs out of hers, and she said half of them ended up she didn't get them. She ended up driving 45 minutes up to help us. And here we have, you guys know what a little bulb pipetter is? They're cheap little things that are throwaway. It's me, my son, my wife, my daughter, Kerry O'Neill, 8 foot by 2 foot tank, pipetting with red lights on. And I have these, did I show you the picture of my glasses?
Yeah.
We got these glasses that were like magnifying glasses, and because my eyesight, if I had these just like this, I couldn't see a single thing in the water. And with these things on, it's still hard. So I had to get my readers out, and then I got these other things out, and I'm sitting there, and one egg at a time, pipette it up, stick it into a cup. So is it going to be a viable thing for us to do, farming corals through the sexual spawning? I think it is, but I think we're so far behind on how to do it the right way. And I know Richard's been doing it, Carrie's been doing it. I got so much advice from them, but I need to find an easier coral than Acanthophilias because you know, we had them spawn on the 14th day, which was a big spawn. And then on the 17th day, we've got little deli containers that you can buy at the store that you put like salad in or whatnot. We use them so that we can keep the cover over it with a thermometer in it, and the evaporation doesn't cause the salinity to rise while they're developing into the swimming larva. And that, is that what you do?
No.
No, you gotta show me what you do. That's Carrie's thing. That's Carrie's thing.
There's a reason why. Not this year. We'll do it differently.
She did it differently too?
You'll do it differently.
Okay, good. But you know, so we had like 10 deli containers with, you know, hundreds upon hundreds of little larvae that are starting to swim around, and you can see these little Acanthophilia babies just swimming around the tank. And it is rewarding to see that, and then it's like, okay, nobody knows when they're gonna lay or they're gonna settle. So it's like, okay, 1 week goes by. I'm like, Carrie, you said they're gonna settle in like a week. She's like, I told you, I don't know what the hell these things are gonna do. Well, finally when hers settled, she got so excited that they settled onto tiles, and she, after 3 days, she decided to pick the tiles up and take them out, and she killed them all. And she called me bawling. And I'm like, ours haven't even settled yet, Carrie. Get your ass out here. We've got thousands of them. I don't know what we're gonna put them all. So what does she do? She comes out with we're scooping them off the surface with a little red shot cup, plastic shot cup, and one of them's settled, one of ours settled right at the bottom of the shot cup. And I still have him settled at the bottom of the shot cup. His nickname is Shot Cup Ass. He will forever have a shot cup stuck to his ass. I hope so, because all the other ones that settled on the shot cups, they all fell off, and then that's not fun. Taking a larva that's just, you know, smaller than a pinhead and trying to not kill it, and then put the smallest possible dab of super glue on a frag plug and then slide it over onto it so it sticks. I have 4 that are like that, no, 3 that are like that, and 1 that's in the shot cup. That's all we have left. Out of, I think we settled 40. Carrie settled 13, and then we gave her 30 more, and she settled all of those, but algae is such a problem with these little guys, and I can't find urchins. I tried getting Biota to sell me urchins, and they blew me off like I was a nobody. So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna sit here with a damn X-Acto knife, and that's what we do. We sit there every day with an X-Acto knife and scrape algae off. And then I got the bright idea when my employee was taking, we have tons of trochus snails. I like trochus snails because they're smart. They're not dumb like astrea snails. Astrea snails, when they go upside down, you just kiss them goodbye, they're dead. Trochus snails, they can flip themselves over no matter what, and they also proliferate like crazy. So when my guys clean out the socks, they find like pinhead-sized trochus snails. So I started throwing trochus snails in with the babies, and they work, but it keeps the scraping with the X-Acto knife down to a minimum, but it's like every 3 or 4 days versus every day. But spawning corals is definitely gonna be something that you're gonna see a lot more from ACI as the future goes on. The problem that I have now, and the reason why I haven't added more than just the Acanthophilias, we also have Cinerinas and Trachyphilias in the spawning system now, is because we don't have the space. And that takes up as much space for what we want to do and the volume that we want to do it in as what one of our smallest coral runs is about 1,000 gallons. And I said it a little while ago, 140 gallons with 60 some odd Acanthophilias isn't smart. And we ended up getting a shipment in after my supplier in Indonesia we told them about us spawning and settling the Acanthophilias, and he's been trying to understand it, and he's been stockpiling these amazing rainbows that he's had for years in his system. And he decided, you guys did it. I've been wanting to do it, and I'm sending you my rainbows. So he sent me, I had permits for 25. I got 25 of the most amazing rainbow acanthophilias I've ever seen in my entire life. And then my other supplier sent me 18, and they were also ridiculous. And we added them to our 148-gallon system. We had 100 acanthophilias in 148 gallons. And little did I ever think, we had a spawn that happened after the full moon in December. Never thought for the life of me that the newly imported ones and the other ones that were in there were gonna spawn again in January after the full moon. And I never set an ORP alarm. It was the stupidest mistake I ever made. And I had hundreds of over 100 acanthophilias all spawn in the system all at once. And I was late coming to work that day. It was a Saturday. It was a Friday night that it happened. It was a Saturday I was coming in, and it was 4:30 until I made it in there. And when I got there, I couldn't even see the corals. And we were talking about a tank that was this deep with acanthophilias in it, and there were some that were like this big. You couldn't see a single coral in the tank. And the sperm was so thick, and I ended up losing 72 corals. It broke my heart. I'm about to get teary up now because it's like the worst thing I ever did was just being naive for loving what I do so much. I kicked myself in the ass because that was the stupidest thing I ever did. To put 100, I mean, that was less than it was like what, 1.2 gallons per acanthophilia. And when you have that much sperm going into the water, and I looked at my ORP and it was like 20. And I'm like, oh my God. So I did something extremely stupid, and then I tried to take all the adults out and put them in my wild coral system, which was 2,000 gallons, and I'm racing to do it. And as I'm picking them up, I can see eggs and sperm just spewing out of them in my hands, and put them in the tank, and they're continuously spawning more and more and more. Even a 2,000-gallon system got slightly cloudy overnight, and the next day, the ones that were fluffy and spawning were still fluffy. The ones that were sucked in and looking like they were gonna die were completely wasted and gone. And it was the majority of the originals that I had for my original spawn. So and we couldn't save any of the babies out of it because there was just so much work to do to get the system back online. I told that story because if you wanna spawn corals, don't do it small. Better have a bigger system or be able to be there right on time, probably like Richard is when he knows it down to the minute. I know down to the minute now when they're gonna spawn after the full moon and what day it is. It's for our setting, when the lights go out, it's 48 minutes after the lights go out, they spawn. And that's on the 14th day after full moon and the 17th day after full moon. Carrie said hers were like 48 minutes after the lights went out, so that makes me feel good that we're pretty close. You know, even a 10-minute window is nothing. But it's amazing how Carrie can actually tell you, I'm over there at her facility, and she goes, you better go over to the Diploastria, the Pseudodiploria tank now. She's like, seriously, now, get over there now. And I get over there, and the corals are just spawning. And I'm like, how in the hell do you know that? She's like, this is the 6th year in a row. They spawned at the exact minute I tell you they're gonna spawn. He's like, that's how predictable they are. And that's what's really cool about it for the future. That's probably one of the most important things, but water volume, especially with acanthophilias, because they release more sperm. And Carrie said that to me. She's like, I've never seen a coral release more sperm. And she's the queen of coral spawning. 16, 17 species spawned and settled in captivity. So there's a lot to learn. I have a lot to do. And the only way I can make it work at my place is if I put like a 600-gallon sump around the base and then have separate tanks for the separate species that we want to do. And that's in the workings, but we just didn't get a chance to do it this year for this year's spawn. So now we'll be there watching like hawks 14 days after every full moon from December, probably till May, because we also have a theory on acanthophilias because nobody knows anything about them. We think they spawn multiple times a year and not just once a year like a lot of other corals do. And only reason we think that is because of the event that happened to me, well, the ones that spawned in interfish in December, then January, and then the debacle I had in February. So kind of theory there, it might be right, it might be wrong. Maybe it was because they were imported and they were stressed, and that's the reason why they didn't all spawn when, you know, interfishes spawned. So we've got another, when's the full moon? When's the full moon, Richard? I haven't been paying attention.
I don't know when the full moon in your system is.
Well, it's the same as, oh, okay.
My system.
Mine's set for out here. Mine's set for like natural, set for Denpasar, Indonesia. So anyway, I have to look at that, but it's probably 14 days after that, I'll be starting to watch for coral spawning. So that's the hope for ACI down the road, is to be a big contributor to, you know, putting knowledge out there on how people can actually set up small scale spawning systems so that we can, you know, keep this industry exciting and happy, and just make sure that we evolve like the freshwater fish did. 18 years ago to today, we still have a lot to learn. We still have a lot to accomplish. And I appreciate all the support that we get from the reefing hobbyists, you know, all the communities, you know, Keith from Reef Bum, Andrew and I know each other. I mean, information is a great thing, and talking about it and figuring things out is what we all need to do. And I just hope that the future holds better than what I'm afraid is going to happen because of Indonesia shutting down. I hope that we can get to the point where we're able to offer up truly cultured, born in captivity corals for the future of this hobby. So thanks for listening to me ramble on. I hope you enjoyed it.